Welcome back to the Maine Basketball Rankings podcast. I am your host, basketball data nerd Lucas McNally. My guest today is longtime athletic director Gary Stevens. Gary, thanks for joining me.
Thanks very much for having me here today, Lucas. Enjoyed chatting with you.
All right, so I had you on because you wrote this book with Dave Eid, and it's Stolen Seasons: How Maine Sports Survived the COVID-19 Pandemic, and it is very long. I'll warn you in advance. I went to pick it up thinking it was going to be like 250 pages, and it is like 700 pages. So first of all, congratulations on writing a 700-page book. That's insane.
Well, it certainly was not the intention of either Dave or me to end up with a 700-page book. I didn't know how long it was going to be, but the pandemic was certainly long. And as we unearthed stories about that event, this size book eventually emerged.
Yeah, I mean, the pandemic was definitely long enough for a book of this size. I think it's a good 350 pages before you get to Maine high school sports, which is what I figured the book would all be about. So, what else is in here in the 350 pages I didn't read?
Well, what is interesting about this project was I think we sort of started out with the idea that it might be about high school sports originally, because that's the world I work in. And Dave actually had come out here in September 2020 when we were having no athletics at all here at Thornton Academy. You might recall, Lucas, at that point, the Mills administration and the Department of Education here in Maine had designated each of our 16 counties with a color code of green, yellow, red, which indicated the transmission of the virus within the counties. And then there were things that schools could and couldn't do based upon that. York County remained in yellow from September 5th or so, right through Columbus Day, and yellow for sports meant red, no sports at all. So David come out here to do an interview with me about how the kids are doing. Flipped off the camera, and at the conclusion of the interview, made a comment such as, "Well, we should write a book about this someday." Well, he made that comment several more times to me over the subsequent months, and we started etching out our ideas about 2 years ago, a little bit over 2 years ago now. Sort of starting with the high schools, but as we realized there were a lot of areas of Maine sport that were impacted by the pandemic. You had the colleges at the community college level, the D3 level, and certainly the University of Maine. You also had professional teams such as the Portland Sea Dogs and the Maine Mariners hockey team that had essentially had no activity for a long time during the pandemic. So what we started doing was we went out and started interviewing different people from different walks of Maine sports life, and we started unearthing their stories. And then people would come to us with their stories, and before we know it, we had a real treasure trove of information about what went on behind the scenes in some of these communities that were striving to bring back sport. And the result is what we think now is a comprehensive chronology of Maine sport over a 2-year period, March 2020 to March 2022. And we're very proud of our efforts and are forever grateful to those people who took the time to share their stories.
Well, you should be proud. It's really good. The At least the chunks that I read, and I was reading through it. It was like going back in time because I remembered probably 75% of it, because I'm pretty plugged in. And then there was stuff I didn't recognize, I didn't know about. And then there was just stuff it was just remembering. Oh, right, right, right. We had the color codes. Oh my gosh, and we would look at the map like every day. And we had these fancy, like, data visualizations, which I loved. I thought those were fantastic. But it's not the greatest setting for them, and just to be brought back in time to go through all that, and it brought back so many memories for me of so many different things.
Without question. And that was one of the things as we started to revisit that period in time. I certainly was reminded of things that part of me would rather probably forget having had to live through that. But at the same time,
Yeah.
I was very fortunate in that I had retained every single email I'd gotten from the Maine Principals Association or other people that I was working with to develop our game plan to return to play during the pandemic. So literally within my email archives, I had really primary source material to go back to and reconstruct this timeline. And then what we were able to do in the book is we provide you the historical timeline, but we would pause within each chapter, around some stories of things that are happening to on the ground here in Maine and schools throughout the state. I mean, we have stories from up in the Aroostook County. We have the Western Mountains. We have the coast. We have here in the greater Portland area where I live and work. So we try to capture what was going on in those communities during that time as we reconstructed that timeline.
Yeah, you spent a lot of time with Forest Hills with their basketball program because they're really one of the unique programs in the state. I mean, you write about how they show up to games on snowmobiles, and you don't really have that anywhere else. Um, what was the decision on which like programs to focus on, or is it just availability of people to answer questions?
A lot of it really was the latter. I actually had reached out to every school in the state and invited them to join me in really a statewide Zoom to unearth some of their stories. And sometimes those interviews led to other interviews, and we discovered other things. We had one coach actually from Bangor, Roger Huber, the cross country coach there, had seen that Dave and I had posted on social media that we were writing the book, and he actually reached out to us because he had a very unique story to share with what happened with a Bangor cross country team, which was absolutely loaded coming into the fall of 2020. They were returning a star-studded lineup. Bangor, if you've ever been in their gymnasium, they have all these wonderful banners coming down from the rafters. It's like the old Boston Garden on steroids with all their state champions. And one sport that had eluded state championship success in their long history was cross country. And Roger Huber, an attorney in Bangor, who serves as their cross country coach, thought that was the year. And everything was building up towards that happening. In that chapter where we profile that team in Stolen Seasons, you learn what happened to that team. You learn about their journey, their very unique journey, and where they were and what they were doing when they got the bad news that the Maine Principals Association, in conjunction with the Department of Ed, felt that at that point it was time to close down that season. And it's a sad story. And Roger actually reached out to us because he wanted those kids remembered. And that chapter, that section of that chapter is a tribute to those students. You mentioned Forest Hills. I'm very good friends with Anthony Amro, the longtime basketball coach there, and he was the athletic director. So we have worked together for 26 years, and he was one of those people who reached out to me. And I just know it's such a unique place up there in Jackman. He has a great basketball program in that little community. And I mean, his story is very unique as well. Here's a place where he's like all of us. He gets shut down, has to go to remote learning. He does not have internet in his home. He has to educate the kids in Jackman that way, some of whom don't have internet. So they're delivering packets of materials, what have you. And his principal, Thad Lacasse, happens to be the pastor of the local church and allows him to have a key to the church where he can get internet. And Anthony brings a space heater for he and his wife, who's also a teacher at the school, to teach the students. And those are stories that, like that we uncovered during the research part of our effort that we thought really needed to be told.
That was actually one of my favorite stories of the sections that I read. The opening, just the fact that Jackman didn't have internet, and my first thought was, well, of course they don't have internet all through Jackman. Why would they? And the whole church thing was just great, and it reminded me of a lot of those like sort of hacks during the early days of the pandemic when nobody knew what was going on, and we were all just sort of innovating on the fly, and there was a sense of community spirit in those early days before it got politicized. Those first, I don't know, 10 days before the politicizing happened that I really miss in a lot of ways. And it was cool to see some of those stories in the book.
Yeah. And it's interesting also you mentioned about community with Jackman and Forest Hills. I'm actually a big Forest Hills fan, and I go to watch their games when I can. Usually I go to their quarterfinals on a Saturday morning when I don't have anything here at Thornton Academy. So I've been to a number of Anthony's contests over the years, and the community does revolve around that. And one of the sad points of that particular situation was they have a tradition in Jackman of doing a little victory lap around the community with their gold ball or the trophy they've earned. They go out to nursing homes and the elderly in the community, because it is a sense of pride for that very small corner of Maine. And not only did Jackman obviously get deprived eventually the next year of an opportunity for a gold ball repeat. We don't know if they would have gotten it or not, but those kids lost that victory lap during that
Hmm.
2020 season. And you have a kid like Travis Desjardins, who is actually in pursuit of the all-time state scoring record, and he ends up with an abbreviated, truncated season in 2021 when there are no fans, and we'll never know if he would have had an opportunity to get that record. And Stone Seasons talks about that pursuit of that record as well for Travis and his individual story as well.
Did you get a sense of, or did you hear stories of other players who came maybe short of like 1,000? Because I'm always fascinated by the players who reach 1,000 points in like the quarterfinals their senior year, and I always think, geez, like, what if they hadn't made the tournament and you ended up with like 995 points? That would be kind of devastating. But and so for the COVID year, if you lost half the season, I'm assuming there's got to be a bunch of those.
There probably were. We didn't really unearth any of those specific stories in our efforts. I think what we try to do was certainly if somebody had come forward with that would have been a really interesting and powerful thing to bring up. I think we focused on the stories that we had access to or that we were able to delve into, and again we're trying to capture that sense of loss and community that will never ever be brought back.
Yeah. What were you went through a couple of different things in there of early days and how coaches and athletic directors were adapting on the fly. What were some of your favorite things that you heard where you went, "Oh, well that's kind of interesting of how they sort of made this work in a very weird situation."
Oh, I would break that down into two parts, Lucas. I think certainly in the spring of 2020, we learned fairly quickly we were not going to have a spring athletic season. So we had
Yeah.
athletic directors all over Maine and coaches finding creative ways to celebrate those seniors who would have no spring season. I know, for example, Mike Archer at Orono High School. Mike actually is from my hometown of Lincoln, Maine. We're both Mattanock Lynx by birth, and Mike was doing some wonderful things for the community of Orono, where he was bringing onto his social media photographs every day of a venue somewhere in the Penobscot Valley Conference where Orono would have played that day. So, sort of like taking you each day through if there had been games where they would have gone, which is nostalgic, sad, but also celebratory. I know there were people all over the state that were turning lights on for seniors at certain points during the year on their fields. Here at Thornton Academy, I had a virtual uh, spring athletic awards night. We had over 200 students and parents on a Zoom meeting where we were giving out our end of year awards virtually and having students give their annual speeches, the captain speeches virtually. And one thing I did here at TA was I set the lights. I put 2020 on the scoreboard in celebration of 2020, and I started counting down the 2020 at a certain point that evening after the awards ceremony, and I synced it so that the lights went out when the scoreboard hit zero,
Hmm.
and it was amazing how many cars pulled up to watch that. So there were things like that going on all throughout the state, and then once we got into return to play, we had to try to be creative as well. One of the things that many of us did was we tried to find a way to get especially the parents of our seniors into the games, particularly if there was, we had those limits of number of people who could be indoor, outdoor, but a lot of us were employing parents as, uh, uh, you know, ball boys, ball girls, scorekeepers, whatever, to get them in to watch their kids play.
Yeah.
We even, that 2021 basketball season without fans, my last game was a game against Gorham, which had people been here for the game, it would have been like one of the best games of the year. I mean, the competition level was unbelievable. We had a great team. We had Peyton Jones and Dylan Griffin. Peyton was a 1,000 point scorer here at TA. Dylan went on to have a marvelous career at the University of Maine at Farmington. But they would have had a shot at going back to the state title game again. And their last game against Gorham, which was, as I said, a phenomenal event. I'm thinking I've got to get their parents in here for our senior night. So we actually we counted our numbers and we realized we had spots for like 7 or 8 people. I had 3 dads do statistics, socially distanced. I had a lady who was the possession arrow person. I had one lady whose job was to sanitize the basketballs. I even gave one mom my computer and she operated my Twitter and did social media posts so that she could participate. So I found a role for all of them so they could be there for the last game their son ever played in high school. And then once our opponent went home, we had our own ceremony. We had our live streaming going on so people could watch that. So I said those are some examples I know of others. And what I was trying to do here, we try to be creative to try to. It wasn't creating normalcy because there was nothing normal about it,
Right.
but we are trying to at least create some sense of inclusion so that especially the families had an opportunity to be with their kids at this really tough time.
I forget who it was, but somebody had because their gym has like a room that's above the gym, and it has a big window, and it almost looks like a skybox. They would have a rotation of parents. Like you could get like one family could be in there a game, and they just set up a rotation. I thought that was kind of a cool thing.
Yep, there are a lot of things that were going on like that, and parents were finding they were being creative as well. In that abbreviated fall season, I remember specifically it was the last Saturday that we actually were able to hold events because we actually had an uptick in transmission here at Thornton, COVID transmission, and we shut down in-person activities and learning through actually into New Year's. But on that particular day, there were people who, again, in the places where we had a fan limit were at adjacent properties of Thornton Academy. We have a U-Haul, which is located just north of us on Route 1. There were people on the other side of that fence. Technically, they were not at Thornton Academy. They were somewhere else, but they got to
Yeah.
watch the game. We had a volleyball match outside. We had to do our volleyball in the fall, outdoor only. And we had some parents who were parked literally a quarter of a mile away from this volleyball match. They could have seen absolutely no detail. There's no way they could have seen the ball had gone over the net, but they wanted to be there with their kids and watch the
Yeah.
game. And they did those things. And we didn't push it at all. We're like, hey, they're not breaking any rules. They care about their kids. We're not going to take that away from them. And good for them for thinking of a way to be able to watch the game.
It's like the people who sit on the roof at the Cubs at the Wrigley Field, and what can they see there? They can't see anything. They can't see balls and strikes there. That's not. Well, I
Exactly.
mean, one thing we did here is I'm in charge of a half marathon in Waldoboro, and it's a really small half marathon. And we actually went on that year. I think we were the only race that happened, but we're also a very small race, and we already have a rule where we don't have any water stations and we have no course support. And it's a very much you're on your own out there, bud. Bring your own water. And we figured out how to make it happen, but it took a lot of like really strict protocols and rules and staggered starts and a bunch of stuff like that. But it was like the joy you saw on people's faces to be able to have a road race in September of 2020 was just awesome.
Exactly. And I think that's one thing we saw is we finally brought our kids back to play. It was actually the Tuesday after Columbus Day. They were so happy to be back. And in those early days of the pandemic, as I think you've alluded to earlier, Lucas, we saw people who were willing to do whatever it took to participate. And one of the rules I had with our kids is we are going to do whatever we can to compete and complete our season. That was our goal, compete and complete. And I'm like, we are going to ask you to do your daily check-ins. We did like they would have to identify if they weren't feeling well. We had a little online document they completed daily. We scrubbed the soccer balls. We did the social distancing. In those early days, you could actually you had to mask up during warm-ups or when you're like together for a meeting. Once you got out and competed, you could actually take the mask off. That changed very late in that fall, and you'll read about that in the book. But people were really happy to be back, and we saw that same phenomenon here, and just the excitement of them to be able to actually be part of the team again. And they didn't have a lot; they had 3 weeks, but I those were 3 special weeks in the history of Thornton Academy athletics. There's no question about it.
It's just weird to me that we were scrubbing the basketballs and the soccer balls,
Yeah.
just in retrospect.
Well,
But we didn't know.
Exactly. Well, my athletic trainer Tony Giordano and I were actually we would play basketball triple headers in 2021, and we were staggering bringing the players in because we had indoor limits of 50 people. And so we might have the JVs in the waiting area during the freshman game, and then the varsity were in the waiting area and we're rotating them in. But between games, we would hold them in the waiting area till we could scrub the seats. And I think the reason we did that, and I know why I did it, was like, this is what we're being told. If we do this, we can play.
Right.
And I was willing at that point to do anything in my power. If that meant I had to scrub seats, scrub basketballs, count numbers. If I see Joe Bailey come in from Channel 8 and that makes 50, I'll go out in the lobby and wait so that we obey the guidelines. I was willing to do anything for those kids, and I think that was pretty much typical across the state among people, certainly in my ranks of the athletic directors.
Yeah, you had a lot of that, and then you had one of my favorite things was that Marana Cook. I don't think this was in the book, but I was reading pretty fast. Cash McClure was the Mr. Basketball frontrunner, and his grandmother was doing stats from home on the stream, and they would send them to me after every game. Like, he had this many rebounds and he had this many assists, and I feel like there might have been a little bit of home cooking in those stats. You know, the assist totals might have been a little high, but I always thought that was pretty cool that he had grandma stats, because you know she's not gonna let him not win Mr. Basketball because they don't have good stats.
Well, exactly, and I think again it shows that people wanted to participate in the game, be part of the game. One of the things we saw with our live streaming, Thornton Academy Television with Jeff Christianberry and Josh Pulsifer, who ran that for us during that year, they were live streaming every single event at every single level, which was great, bringing it to homes. And there was an opportunity for people in the chat box to weigh in, and we saw just all positive stuff like Go TA, number 23 is my grandson. People wanted to somehow participate, but let people know they were there as well. And that was that. Again, it's sad, but also heartwarming as well that we were at least able to provide that opportunity. Although it was certainly something surreal.
Well, that was really the thing that supercharged streaming, because I remember streaming before then and it was okay. There was Brewer was doing it, and a couple other, and Gardner was doing it, and a couple other schools, and you went from maybe, I'm just gonna make up a number here, 20% of schools that would stream things to 85, 90%. And I think that was really a great thing that's mostly we've maintained post pandemic.
100%. I think there are a number of things that really lessons or opportunities that came out of the pandemic that really they revolutionized schools, and they revolutionized school sports. Certainly Brewer, with the work that Jim Churchill was doing up there, and I give Dave Eid, my colleague at Brewer, a lot of credit. He was very instrumental in trying to uh, advance that, and it was groundbreaking. Rob Munzing, who actually Rob Gardner was one of our broadcasters for Thornton football for many years, so I've had a long
Sure.
connection with him personally. And he was on the cutting edge anyway. But you're right, other communities were doing it, and one of the things that really was a advantage to us is that the NFHS network was providing those cameras to schools to be able to provide these services. And so they're things that you could access for free. You could get the equipment for free. Just needed to do the setting if you wanted an announcer list, or you could bring in an announce team as well. And we saw a lot of schools employing students, which again is another great benefit.
That's so
I know
awesome.
here, I know here at Thornton we have Cole Purvis has done that for us. Zach Taranko was a young man who did it during the pandemic. Now at Quinnipiac, and over at Gorham, there's a young man named Thomas Curtis, who is a broadcasting superstar
Those
in the world.
troublemakers.
Yes, but those young men, I think they they gained opportunities because of this changing way of delivering the content.
And I know Cole and Thomas a little bit and worked with them some during the tournament this year, and they were not the least professional people working that tournament by a long shot. They were like, I was really impressed with both of them, and Tom wrote a double A roundup for me this year, which was very cool because I have trouble getting to double A games because they're so far away. Um, and yeah, I think that's one of the great opportunities we've seen, and hopefully we can get more Coles and Thomases around the state.
I agree, and it's education based athletics, and I think one of the things we've learned from that is there are other kids that can participate in sport, whether they be the team managers, the band, the color guard, the student announcer, the statistician. There are a lot of roles for people in sport that they actually can carve into a career. And I think Cole and Thomas are two young men who have bright futures in broadcast journalism.
Absolutely. So I'll swing back to our race. We learned a thing in our race that we would, because part of all of the protocols was we put the medals and the shirts in a Ziploc bag at the end of the race, so there was no, 6 feet apart and all that stuff back when we were washing our groceries. But then I realized that I really liked having the shirt at the finish line, and you had to earn the shirt, and you couldn't just show up at the start line and collect your shirt and walk home. So that was a thing we've kept, and we still do that. We make you earn the shirt. I mentioned that to say, what are some things that you've seen in the pandemic that were necessary because of the pandemic and people have kept and gone, oh, this is actually a better way to do things?
Well, I think we were talking about technology, and the whole live streaming component has actually fed into some other things. One of the things I had to do was we brought school athletics back in 2020. Was I had to get information out to parents, and one of the tools we used to do that was our Zoom or Google Meets or whatever platform you might be using. And so I was able to, and again, I'm a 20th century man, Lucas. I started teaching in 1983 with chalk and erasers, and so I'm still trying to adapt here. And I think I sell myself short, but I also recognize my limitations.
I mean, you
But
also went to Harvard, so
I did, but I was a liberal arts guy. I was not a computer technology guy. Although the master of Lowell House where I live he was a computer science professor. But but one of the things that I think we learned to do was leverage those tools in other ways. And one of the things I did with my parents' meetings is rather than bring them in, and we couldn't in 2020, we provide information online. So we had parent information nights virtually, and I can get my athletic trainer in to speak with them. I could get my school nurse in to speak with them. I could bring in a guest from all over the country if I want to provide
oh
some
yeah.
inspiration. And so we did that, and we recorded it, and then could email that recording to the people who didn't or couldn't attend. So we have gotten the information out. So I discovered that was something that I could do. I even did it with. I said, hey, I can use this to educate my new coaches about Maine Principals Association rules they need to know. So I even created a video. It's a 12-minute thing with all the key MPA rules a coach needs to worry about: the transfer rule and sports season rule, and all those things that could get a coach in trouble. I created a video and was able to distribute that. I did it at Sugarloaf Mountain one day on a weekend when I was up there hiking. I got up early, did my video, then went out into the mountains. So, the technology has allowed us to get a lot of information out there in some new ways, and it really revolutionized, sort of how I distributed my information.
And if you're talking to a parent and you say to the parent, okay, we have this parent meeting. It's going to be around dinner time for some reason. It's going to be an hour long. You're going to have to drive there. You're going to have to make small talk with people you maybe don't like. Or you can watch a Zoom from your home and not do any of that. That's a pretty easy decision for, I think,
Yeah.
most people.
Yeah, and I usually as you see, I'm wearing a tie now. I am a tie wearer. I'm the last of a breed. It used to be all the ads wore ties. Now I'm the dinosaur. But when I go to professional events, I wear a coat and tie. Just what I do. And man, those August parent meetings for the fall were like brutal with
Oh,
the heat. And so you've got people who are they're opting not to go to those. They're out going to Dairy Queen or some other ice cream place, and yeah, right. They're not always opting to come into the schools.
what are some things, because the world's not getting bigger, it's getting smaller, as we all know. And so, one thing I heard someone say during the pandemic was, this was a really close to being way worse. Some medical person was saying, like with the chains of DNA or whatever. I don't know. So let's say we have, I think, if not a pandemic, we'll have another maybe global health problem in our lifetimes. I think that's pretty likely. What have we learned from this one that we can use for the next one to sort of, start on second base.
You make a good point there, and I always I've been, as Dave and I have been doing some of our radio interviews, promoting our book. One of the stories I shared, it's a fact, is I have to confess I'm not the first athletic director in the history of Thornton Academy to serve during a pandemic. Ralph Sanborn was the athletic director at Thornton Academy in 1918 during the Spanish flu pandemic, and Thornton Academy had a full slate of basketball games and a full slate of football games that year. And Mr. Sanborn left me no notes. I've scoured this office. I can find nothing. Like, how did he do it? Maybe he was a lot better than I was. But as in the book, we even have a photo which became very iconic as we started to build our own playbooks for 2020 on. Was during that pandemic, there was a photograph taken in at Georgia Tech at their at a football game that they played with Furman, and you can see in the photograph a number of people seated there, people who are doughboys, either heading off to World War I or coming back from World War One. They've got their Smokey Bear hats on. You see businessmen in coat and tie. You see ladies well dressed. They're all wearing their masks and they're wearing them correctly. And that was really that was the only tool we started with, like how life might be different for us moving forward. And that was a hint that, they were doing that as a way to prevent the spread of the disease, which was a very deadly pandemic. I think there were 500,000 Americans who died of a Spanish flu. So that's where we started. What I'm hoping, and that's probably one of the reasons we did Stolen Seasons, is to share with, and hopefully there's no other pandemic, but if there is again, what we did. And I think the most important things that we did, and the most important lessons that the book reveals, is number one and foremost, we had empathy for the people who were leading school sports in this state, had empathy for kids. And you read their stories, you read the creative things they did, and all for kids. They did things for the right reasons. And it really, here in the schools, there was a lot of kindness because we wanted to try to give these students back. The kids who are graduating from Thornton on June 9th, I didn't see their faces for a year and a half. They were covered in masks. So we did everything we can just to try to share with them just some decent kindness, because we couldn't see them like we do today. I think also another lesson is the importance of collaboration and communication with each other. And if there are best practices out there, try to replicate them in your facility. Try to work with a colleague. Try to help a colleague out. We were very understanding in terms of transportation, and that it's hard to get places when you can put one kid per seat on a bus, and you're going to have to do a lot of working together with the person in the next community or two communities over, try to make sure the game takes place. If somebody was without, we tried to find an opportunity for them. Berwick Academy plays in an out-of-state prep league during 2021, that school year. They joined as an MPA school, and we here in York County, when we're in that yellow, we incorporated them into our plan as to when we got back to sport, how they would be able to fit in and get games as well. So I think the most important lessons that we learned and that are revealed in our book is that, the importance of just showing that human touch, and also working together with others to try to provide opportunities for all. And I think we did a really good job of that. I'm happy that eventually we got back to no masks, not having to worry about checking who had vaccinations, et cetera. But I'm very proud of Maine high school athletic directors and coaches during that critical 2021 school year, and how they responded to something that none of us had been prepared for.
Yeah, I think everyone involved did a pretty great job in a pretty tough situation, because we were literally all flying blind pretty much the whole time. And you write about the COVID pods that happened during that one year. I thought that was a really fascinating year. It was really a hassle for me because schedules kept changing. So that I had to keep updating spreadsheets. And I'm like, what do you mean they're not? Oh, okay. All right.
Well, Lucas, one of my roles here in my area for many years was I was the liaison for boys and girls soccer in our league. and I actually took on working with the Western Maine Conference, who also a lot of their schools are here in Cumberland and York County. And I was working with 36 different schools in building soccer schedules. And again, we had a guideline in those days that you could only play schools within your county or in the adjacent county.
Right.
Uh, so somebody from Cumberland could play Saginaw, which adjoins, or York, or themselves. We were pretty much Cumberland, although technically York does connect with Oxford up by the Freiburg area. But we had to build schedules that made sense and provide opportunities for all 36 schools. So I had done so. Then the traffic light thing came out, and York County is out. So I had to rebuild it again for the
Yeah.
Cumberland schools, and you're off, and here you go. And then I had to take care of the York schools, and then we would wait 2 weeks, and we'd still be in the yellow. So all right, let's cut it back a little bit. Wait 2 more weeks, let's cut it back a little bit. And so we were constantly, in terms of the master schedule, not even talking about the minutia of once you have your master schedule, making sure it fits your field use. It was constantly changing. It was a lot of work, frustrating at times, exhilarating at times when it worked, but something I don't want to do again.
Yeah, it was super fun. And then I'm there going, trying to keep track of it all and like 8 scores. And I'm just like, I don't even know where these games are going. I don't know what's happening. We'll do the best we can and try to
And,
have a little bit of normalcy.
and there were games that, one of the stories I do tell in the book is there were games that were underway that were even stopped or stopped just before they're supposed to take place. One night here at Thornton Academy, we had a game schedule at Bonnie Eagle High School in Standish, which is 2 towns removed here from Saco. Our JV team went over to play their game. I had no home games at night, so I went home, and as I'm driving down my street, and I live in Standish, I live just beyond Bonnie Eagle High School, my phone rings, and it's a colleague within our league. We had played this school a week before, and he says, Gary, I have bad news for you. He says, during our varsity basketball game, we played you. We've learned since that one of our players has tested positive. In those days, if you were close contact within a certain number of days, and they'd counted back like when she must have had it, you were out for 2 weeks. So I had my varsity was en route to Bonnie Eagle, and I've just been told as I'm driving into my driveway that they all have to be shut down. So I pulled in my driveway, and I was in my driveway 45 minutes on the phone. My wife is looking through the doors like, what is he doing? My car, like many of us, it's a restaurant, it's a wardrobe, it's also my office. And so I've got my phone numbers out, and I'm trying to contact my nurse. What do I do? You need to turn them around. They are out. Well, I've got 3 girls who are playing the JV game who were also playing varsity at night. They had to be taken out of the game. They had to be isolated. So I'm communicating with my coach, turn the bus around. I'm communicating with Eric Curtis, the AD at Bonnie Eagle, numbers 5, 10, and 15, making up those numbers, just for the sake of illustration. You got to take them out of the game. You got to put them out in the hallway till I figure out how we're going to get them back.
Put them outside.
Yeah, there'll be no varsity game. And by the way, we had come off a 2-16 season the previous year. We had a lot of freshmen and sophomores. We were 6-0. Eric Marston, my head coach, had just got his 100th career win. We're turning our program around during this COVID year, and so we had some momentum. We were really excited, and we were done. That was the last event of that team season, and it was turning around someplace in Buxton to come back to Saco, and we never had any more girls basketball that year. But that game that night illustrates just that was going on. I'm not saying I was the exception. That was the rule. That
Oh
was what
yeah.
was happening all over the state.
Yeah. Do you ever think about, and I think about this a lot, the timing of when the pandemic hit and the 2020 tournament? Like if COVID's 3 weeks earlier, there's probably people in the Augusta Civic Center, in the Bangor, at the hockey rink, at the expo, and that's a super spreader event.
Oh, question. It's funny. I was thinking back in my coaching days. I coached girls basketball at Bonnie Eagle High School before I came over here to Thornton. I coached for 3 years at Thornton Academy in Lincoln. 1990, the girls basketball team that I was involved with, we qualified for the Class B tournament, the Eastern Maine Class B tournament, were playing Herman. Actually, the my classmate Timmy Thornton, who now is at Herman again, was coaching Herman at that time. They were coming off a state championship season, so we're supposed to play them in the quarterfinals. There was this flu that was going around at that time, and there was talk about among the MP about, do we actually have this tournament or not? And what they did was they said, if you have this shot, you should be all set. So I went and got a shot at my doctor's office in Lincoln 2 days before we were supposed to play Herman, and I never got anything. And I guess, all was good, but there was talk about what could a virus do if they brought all the fans in. And one of the comments was no fans at all, which that would have been devastating for many reasons. And those, because the economy of Bangor, certainly during February vacation, it circulates around that tournament. Just, it's a festival of basketball. It's an annual rite that people come to, and the auditorium was the place to be February break. Before they tore it down for the Cross Center, but they didn't go that far. And as I look back, it's interesting that the timing was when it was. Not only had the basketball tournament concluded, but the ice hockey tournament had concluded the previous Saturday. Lewiston knocked off Scarborough in multiple overtimes to win a very exciting game. And in fact, Scarborough's redemption, which actually came at the expense of my school, Thornton Academy, is told in that book as well in one of those high school chapters. But it would have been considered to be a potential super spreader. I think there would have been a lot of fear at that time.
Yeah.
Because so many people would have been in those arenas once this word came up about this virus, because during those early days, I think all of us had this apprehension. Is it going to get me? What is it? How will I feel? I literally remember going to the supermarket the Saturday after they had closed off school at that point for 2 weeks. And my wife and I were walking down an aisle, and I heard a lady cough. And I was in a panic. I was like, is this it?
Yeah.
Am I going to get this thing? We didn't know.
Yeah. I mean, you got every year at the tournament, it seems like every year there's a team that has the flu, and there's always, every so often at least, there's a story of some kid who throws up in a garbage can courtside and keeps playing. And it's not hard. Maybe I watch too many pandemic movies like Contagion and whatnot, but it's not hard to imagine that that's COVID and we don't know it yet. And then all these people go back to their hometowns with COVID, and that's could be really bad. And I think we got incredibly lucky.
I think we definitely did as well. I myself did not get as lucky when it came to COVID. One of the ironic things, I didn't bring this up in the book because it was not designed to be a self-revelation, but that hockey game I mentioned in 2022 where Thornton Academy plays Scarborough in the state championship game, I couldn't attend that, and I couldn't attend the previous state semifinal game with Little because on that Tuesday, I finally came down with COVID. Literally, when the book ends, the story of the book ends is when I get COVID personally, and I had to watch Thornton in a state championship game online. It's the only TA state championship event of the time once during my time at TA. I couldn't attend because it was the last day of my quarantine, but it became sort of one of the blessings is I got to watch Southern Maine Community College's celebration coming back from a national tournament that they won, which is one of the stories in the book. So I got to, it was, even though I hadn't been thinking about writing the book at that point, that idea would not really, we wouldn't start doing that for another month. I had the first story of the book that we started working on, I had a chance to witness.
That's pretty cool. But it's so hard to get to a state game and to not be able to be there would be terrible.
Without question, but it was just the way it was, and you have to set the example and do the right thing. And that same nurse who told me that the kids had to turn around, I called her on Tuesday. In fact, I remember I took my test here, was not feeling well. I took a test, and it was one of those that said, wait 12 minutes, and if it turns red, you're positive. Well, it was less than 2 minutes, and it was crimson.
And you really have it, yeah.
And I'm like, I guess I have it. I guess this thing got me, and I went home and didn't appear back here for a while.
All right. I wanted to ask you some questions about AD questions because you're retiring this year, right? Did I see that correctly? At the end of this year?
That's fact. Yeah, I've been involved, Lucas, in education for 41 years, 42 years
Wow.
in sport. If you go back to my senior year in college, I did some coaching at a private school in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So that was my first time working with kids in an educational setting. But I've been 28 years as an AD, 11 at Bonn Eagle prior to here at Thornton, and then since '07 here in Saco. And I've got some other things I want to do at this point in my life. It's been a wonderful career. I've truly enjoyed it. It's been the honor of my life to be here at Thornton Academy for sure. But I've also I'm going back to my roots. I've been an adjunct professor at St. Joe's College for about 7 years, and I'm adding to my course load this fall. And so I'm going to be a semi-retired college professor and still stay involved with Maine ADs, our state association as our assistant director, and hopefully mentor and help and provide some help for the current generation of ADs.
Oh, they'll rope you into stuff for sure.
Oh, it's the way it works.
Absolutely.
The thing is, in this business, nobody ever says no. That we never say no.
Right. Right. So how in the all the years you've been doing this, how has the job of an athletic director changed? Would you say?
Well, I think it's evolved a great deal. I think there's some core things that we always have done. We are logistics. That's been pretty constant. Setting up, tearing down, opening up, closing up, all those types of things. Turn the lights on, turn the lights off. Those core things, those logistical things, are pretty standard, and they have been for years. What I think has happened though is that the leadership that's expected of an AD has changed. It used to be that you sort of work your way up through the ladder, coach, uh, or teacher, coach, AD, and that was sort of my pathway. Um, and you didn't always. And I think part was you just didn't know about some of the things that maybe you were responsible for. But it's such a litigious society, and there are high school ADs all over the country who are find themselves in the courts because of it could be a malfunction in the bleachers that they're
Ooh.
responsible for. Ultimately, it could be a problem in the field. It could be a rut that ultimately leads a school and the AD and everybody involved with that to get sued. It could be something involving a coach. It could be an employment issue. So I think just the litigation that has seemed to accelerate in high school sports has put ADs on the hot seat more so now and ever. And also, I think it's led a lot of people to leave the profession because they don't want to be the next person on the witness stand. One of my mentors, John Olson, who was a longtime athletic director in Madison, Wisconsin, he was really one of the fathers of the National ADs Association. Used to say in his trainings as an AD, number one, you're considered to be the content expert in your field in the schools. Nobody else in the school knows your role like you do. But at the same time, you have a responsibility. You could have known something, you should have known something. So I think one of the biggest changes is that and we're doing this, we have to educate ourselves about a variety of subjects and primarily legal issues surrounding athletics that we didn't necessarily, they were there, the issues were there, but we didn't necessarily think of them at that time. Society was different. And so you have more sleepless nights. There are more things that worry you. There are more things that you see something happen is like, oh, I hope that I'm not going to get in trouble for that, or I hope that that person's okay because we don't want to get sued for that.
Right.
A lot more of those types of issues than ever before.
And everybody's got a phone with a camera on it, so stuff that maybe never came to light 20 years ago is all over Facebook the next day.
Yeah, social media has totally changed what we do. And again, sometimes in a positive way, and that it's a great tool for us to get information out. But I always say, this thing here is a blessing and a curse, and it has created a lot more work than we ever could have imagined before. People used to mail us pictures of things that suggesting wrongdoing, and it would take days to get to you, and the season might have been over by the time you got it. But today it does not take long. It's on your. Sometimes by the time you get home, you have photographs, emails, whatever, and that's going to dictate the next day's work.
Yeah, and then they send it to me, and then it's in a newsletter, and it's a whole thing.
Exactly.
How has dealing with parents changed? And well, maybe a better question is, how do you deal with parents to act? Because a lot of times you've got to be the firewall between your parents and the coach. Because if the parents go to the coach with every single time that Johnny didn't get enough playing time, we wouldn't have any coaches.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things is that I've always gotten along generally very well with parents. A lot of ads, the common joke is the best school to be an ad is an orphanage because there are no parents. I've never subscribed to that.
That's a good joke, though.
Yeah, but I've heard that at many ad presentations, and people still laugh at it, so I guess it has a shelf life. But I find parents as critical community partners. And there's some parents and there's some people who are, I would call, a challenging personality. And what makes them challenging is you don't necessarily understand them. So you need to learn and listen and try to find out where they're coming from. One thing I understand from all these years of working in schools is that the kid is the most important person in that parent's life. And they want the best for their child. And, actually there's common ground because coaches want the best for their kid and ads want the best for their kid as well. Some of the toughest coaches that you can imagine, or you might think as the toughest coaches in Maine, have the softest spot when it comes to kids. They're teddy bears underneath. You'll be surprised at some of the people you would think, oh boy, they're really hard and tough to deal with. Oh, they care a lot about kids. I'll tell you that. What we need to do is need to bridge that gap and that understanding. And I think what has made it more challenging in more recent years is, in this day and age, parents have invested so much more time and money in their kids than ever before. And because they want the best for their kids, they would love to see their kids have an opportunity to go to college, go to the next level. The kid aspires to play at a certain college. They like to be able to do everything they can to get them there. So they send them to camps. They send them to private coaches. They get involved in club sports, which, again, is an investment of time and money. And so the athletic director has to have some understanding and empathy that the parent has invested a lot in that kid, and understand that that's where the person is coming from, and don't get caught up so much in the personality of the person, or sometimes even the delivery of the message, as to what are they saying, what are they wanting, what do they need, and how can you help them um, make a connection with the coach or with you to try to work their way through it. Um, these are good people by and large, who, again, just want the best for their kid. And it's just a different paradigm that we're under today with social media. And you add on to that now things like NIL. You have high school kids in this country that have significant NIL deals. And then the transfer portal. I would not want to be a college AD or a college coach.
Oh
Man, I
yeah.
cannot imagine dealing with that. It's just a different world. And that has changed. The interpersonal relationships are the same. And there were parents when I was a high school student in the 70s who complained about playing time, but they hadn't invested as much in terms of, again, time or money as the people today in those kids.
Parents are much more involved, it seems. There's always the jokes with my generation, because I grew up in the 80s and 90s, that like our parents didn't know where we were. It was there was the whole joke of like, it's 10 o'clock, do you know where your kid is? And no, not really. Somewhere running around the neighborhood.
Well, another common line that is, or term is used to describe those involved parents, is the helicopter parents. They hover over things, and I think we mentioned there are all these opportunities to play and clubs and rec and all these things. They need coaches, and oftentimes the parents take on the job of coaching. So they're not only invested in terms of the finances, but they are invested personally at their own time in terms of working with these kids. And some of the programs have very evolved training. Soccer, for example, usually the coach at some of these elite soccer programs, you need to have taken courses and have specialized training and licenses in order to do that. But some of the sports, they're just looking for somebody who wants to do it. And so if you've got somebody who's done it, but maybe doesn't have the training, they're not going to be able to understand as easily the high school coach where he or she is coming from, who is required to have training by the MPA or by their local school in order to have those jobs. So that can create a disconnect as well, I think, many times.
And it's, how would you say, because if you can turn a parent into like a positive force for a program, it's amazing and it can really level up a program. Is there a trick to doing that, to turn them from the person who's screaming at the refs into the person who's running the youth program?
Well, I think the key thing is just number one, just have some tools at your disposal if you're a coach in particular that allow you to communicate effectively with that parent. Jack Morrison is my longtime freshman football coach here at Thornton. He's won over 200 games coaching freshman football. And he never aspired to be a head coach. He just likes coaching at that level. He was our longtime math department head and still continues to coach. I've actually been at Jack's parent information meetings, and his first line with the parents is, folks, we're going to start with this fundamental. Please understand this is about your son. This is your son's experience, not yours. That's the foundational piece. This is your son's experience, not yours. And so he establishes that guideline, creates that distance, and then he talks about, he builds the trust with them. This is what we're going to do to take care of your son over the next 12 weeks or whatever. So I think you have to be really nuanced in your communication so that you sort of lay the groundwork, but also explain to them, number one, what are our boundaries here in the program? But also, if you have concerns, how do you express those? And a good coach will always have avenues of communication so that parents don't understand what can my child do better, or why isn't he playing? You have a way to do that, and oftentimes it's teaching the child to advocate for himself or herself. So I think the best coaches have figured out good, strong communications with parents because they're critical partners. We do not have kids without their parents. They provide their kids to us, and we have that legal in loco parentis in place with parents. We parent guideline to work by while they're here. We're critical partners in this process, and so we need to make sure that we understand that they have a role, and there are things that they can do to be involved and to support us, and help their child have a better experience.
What would you say? I'll end with this. So you've got a new athletic director coming in at Thornton Academy, and you don't want to be the guy who's hovering over his shoulder, going, "I don't know about that. That's not a great idea." But what advice would you give for a new athletic director or someone who's aspiring to become an athletic director?
It's all about contacts. It's all about networking. It starts early. I wasn't going to be a high school athletic director when I got out of college in 1983. I was actually thinking for a while. During college, I thought about pre-med. I thought a little about pre-law. I thought about journalism. Little did I realize I'd be authoring or co-authoring a 700-page book then, but I thought about it back then. But education was the family business. My dad was an educator. He was a principal and taught at the same. He was actually a teacher principal in Lee, Maine, where he actually had grown up and coached and was really my role model. My sister is the current superintendent of schools in Freeport. So education is the family business. And as I've looked back, I realized all along the way, I was meeting and connecting with people, and all the choices I made in terms of my career path created important outlets for me to explore opportunities and to get information when I need it. When you, as an AD coming in into especially if it's a new school, but certainly just even it's the school where you've been working, it's a whole new world, and there's a lot of information that you need to know, you need to be able to apply, but you also need to be able to find. And so those networking relationships that you've created over the years and you will continue to create are the key to that. One of the things we try to do in Maine with our new ADs is provide mentors for them, people to reach out to, lifelines so they can ask questions, whether they be simple or complex. And one of the things the mentors all know is that what might be a simple question to you is really important or difficult for somebody else. And you need to be able to respond to that. So we try to create formal networking systems, but sometimes those informal ones are important as well. The person in your league in the next town, the person that was the AD at the high school you attended, whoever that person might be. I have people that will call me as lifelines. I've been doing this 28 years. There are people I talk to as lifelines too. The learning never stops. So I think the important thing is you realize, first of all, you don't know it all. You may never know it all, but you've got to be willing to ask the question, and be humble. You got to be humble. You've got to not think that because you have to ask for some help means that it's a sign of weakness. It's actually a sign of strength and a sign of proficiency in my mind.
Well, I mean, it'd be impossible to know it all. Like, there's just so many different things. You're managing how many different sports?
Oh yeah, well, we have 25 here. I got a call yesterday from a colleague of mine in Arkansas who just retired as an AD, who has more experience as an AD than I do at 28 years of in the profession, was asking me a question about lightning policy. He
Okay.
needs some help with lightning policy, working with the ADs, or the Athletic Trainers Association in Arkansas, and he's calling me here in Maine for help. So that's veteran ADs are not afraid to ask a question. What are you doing? How would you do this to other ADs from around the country or people who may even have less experience than themselves?
Now I'm trying to think what would be so complex about lightning policy. I mean, it's lightning, so get out of the way.
Well, what he'd shared, Lucas, was that apparently athletics in Arkansas run very differently than in Maine. In Maine, you have a tournament or an event, you have committees that are set up, and we also locally we know the 30-minute rule by heart. We do
Hmm.
that, but in Arkansas, apparently the athletic directors don't have the leverage that the principals have. So you have principals running sporting events and making decisions that maybe are in the best interest of the athletes. And apparently, there have been some events where lightning has been in the distance, and the athletic trainers are saying, "We need to shut this down." And they're like, "No, we need to get this in today." And they've been going on. So
Oh,
the athletic trainers are looking for some teeth in
I
policy
gotcha.
and some other precedents around the country, and maybe some case law to convince their decision makers that you need to abide by these guidelines, or somebody could get very badly hurt or worse.
It's all about figuring out the rules and making
Exactly.
sure they're applied. It's just like having a mask, and if you're gonna wear it around your chin, it's not really a mask.
No, and
It's just a chin
again, I
strap.
think I think we saw that during the pandemic, and we talk about the stolen seasons that the what we saw in that photo from the Georgia Tech Furman game. That's what we were hoping for.
Yeah.
We might have seen that in fits and starts at the beginning, but that was not the case in certainly in 2022 when we finally took those masks off.
I saw someone, I couldn't believe this. This was maybe 3 weeks ago, so there's no masking rules anywhere. In Hannaford, guy masking voluntarily, but it's around his chin. And I'm like, what what are you doing? Why?
Well,
Just
apparently
take it off.
his razor stubble is safe.
Something like that. Yeah. All right. So the book, I'll wrap this up here. The book is Stolen Seasons. You can see it right here if I can do this correctly. You wrote it with Dave Eid. It is 700 pages long. And where can they can find it? I know at Sherman's. They can find it at Moody's Diner. So you could
Yeah,
start to read it over some pie.
yeah.
Where else? A bunch of different places.
Sure, yeah, and I might add just as another thing too is that there's a lot of content, and you don't have to even read it in order. You can read a chapter and then start with chapter 5 and come back to chapter 2.
I
It's
started with
nice.
the Beach to Beacon chapter. It was just the
There you
last
go.
one.
Yeah, I might also add the afterword as well. You learn about what happened to a lot of the people that you read about in the other chapters. So there's an epilogue to the whole thing. But yeah, you can go. You can pick it up a number of ways. You can go to our website www.stolenseasons.com. And you can find links to pick that up on Amazon. It'll be shipped right to your home within a few business days. So there's certainly some copies available there. We're available at 10 different retailers around Maine. We are at Sherman's. I know the Sherman's in Freeport has several copies. I delivered those Saturday. We are at Moody's Diner. And if you enjoy diners in York County, the Maine Diners, remember the Maine Gift Shop, also has copies. We are now at Land's End Gift Shop on Bailey Island, Ecopelagicon in Rangeley, None Such Books in South Portland, The Bookworm in Gorham, among other and I actually want another one, Gulf of Maine Books in Brunswick, right there on Main Street. We're available in all those places. And Dave and I are also will be doing some public events. We've done a few already, and so go to our website. You'll see where we will be, and we actually, you buy it from us personally. It's there's a little bit of a discount. We'll even sign it for you if you want.
Ooh, nice. It's really an exhaustive, like comprehensive look at the pandemic. I was kind of blown away by how much stuff was in there. So it's a really great job.
We really appreciate it. It was seriously, it was an absolute labor of love. Dave and I collaborated on this, and we were also fortunate that we were able to tell some stories and get some tales from people that are even more well known. Some of the Dave being in obviously the media world can get access to people I can't. So he was able to get to Jeremy Swayman, who as of this taping will be playing in game 2, I guess.
He's very busy.
Montgomery will play him tonight. There's still question whether it's going to be Allmark, but you learn about Jeremy Swayman's senior year at the University of Maine. In that he interviewed for the book. Dave was able also to interview Cooper Flagg. The last chapter of the high school section, it talks about the origins of the Cooper Flagg legend in Maine. That the Comus freshman year, you can relive that. So we were able to get that. And also we interviewed Joan Benoit Samuelson as well for that Beach to Beacon chapter. And I actually got to interview Dave McGilvery, which was really exciting for me, who runs the Boston Marathon. So we've got some celebrity people in there as well, and you can learn their stories.
All right. It's fantastic. Thank you so much for doing this. This is great. I learned a bunch of stuff.
Well, it's great to meet you, Lucas. Enjoy following you on social media. And I was a truth be told, when I was in high school, I was a stats nerd and still am to a big degree. So when I see those numbers crunched out, it brings me back to my youth.
Awesome. Thanks so much. All right, let's wrap this up here. This has been a production of MaineBasketballRankings.com, which is your comprehensive source for Maine high school basketball coverage from Ashland to York and everywhere in between, like Thornton Academy and Bonnie Eagle and places like that. If you like this show, subscribe, rate it, leave a review, all that fun stuff, because it really helps the algorithms. And until next time, thank you so much. And thank you, Gary, for joining me.
Thank you, Lucas.
All right, we'll call it a day, and we'll see you next time.